Thank you, member. Recognize the Minister for Energy Mines.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So, I really want to speak to this piece of legislation. I am personally very ecstatic that it has finally been introduced by a government here in this House. I spent several years across the floor in opposition introducing a poverty reduction plan, 5 times no less, Honourable Speaker, and each and every time members who are now in opposition when they were in government refused to bring it to the floor for a debate, much less pass this into legislation. They could have introduced their own bill, Honourable Speaker, but they chose not to. So when I hear members opposite use words like, this bill just kicks the issue down the road, it just kicks the can down the road, Honourable Speaker, what are they talking about? What are they talking about, Honourable Speaker? I spent 8 years on the other side in opposition watching them. They didn't even kick a can down the road, Honourable Speaker. They just ignored it altogether. They just pretended that poverty didn't really exist here in British Columbia, Honourable Speaker. Maybe because they were busy working for the top 2% of income earners, Honourable Speaker. They gave a tax break to those people. But when it came to supporting some of the most vulnerable people in our community, to people who are living in poverty, to people who are struggling, they ignored them year after year after year. We got a little bit of movement from them when we brought forward the issue of the child support clawback, and they recognized that, yes, that clawback was wrong. And we saw $17 million go back into the hands of children who deserve to see their child support from their non-custodial parent. But, Honourable Speaker, that was a little bit of give, because mostly what they did from people living in poverty was take. The bus pass clawback, Honourable Speaker, is a case in point, where they gave with one hand and they took with the other. A raise to rates, the first that were seen in so long, and then they took it away with the other hand in that very same budget, Honourable Speaker. So when I hear members opposite from the BC Liberal Caucus talk about kicking the can down the road, Honourable Speaker, I have to say that they didn't even identify a can to kick, much less care about this issue, much less introduce legislation, much less actually take action, Honourable Speaker, making life more affordable for British Columbians and making sure that people are being lifted out of poverty. And this plan, Honourable Speaker, what we're talking about with this plan is lifting 25% of people who are currently in poverty out, and lifting 50% of children who are currently in poverty out of poverty, Honourable Speaker. That's what we're talking about here. When British Columbia has some of the worst poverty rates in the country that happened under the BC Liberal watch, Honourable Speaker, we're coming in with solutions to the problem that they created. And, Honourable Speaker, I keep hearing the mumblings and the heckles coming from the opposition benches about it's all about jobs and you need to have a jobs plan. Well, Honourable Speaker, I'm very proud of something that happened this week. The largest private sector investment deal in British Columbian history, in Canadian history, $40 billion of investment is coming to the north of this province. And coming from a background of advocating for people living in poverty and finding ways to get out of poverty, whether I was the coordinator at the Nelson Food Cupboard, the community coordinator for the Nelson Committee on Homelessness, the community coordinator for the Bondia Micro-Lending Circle, Honourable Speaker, or as a Nelson City Councillor, or as the MLA for Nelson Creston. When I talk to community after community after community, to First Nations leaders throughout the north, and what a liquefied natural gas plant meant for them, and what LNG Canada was working on, and what they were working on with them, it was clear that the leadership from First Nations communities and non-Indigenous communities, and what they saw as opportunities for pathways out of poverty for them, was an opportunity for their communities, an opportunity for this province, and an opportunity for this country. Jobs absolutely are important, Honourable Speaker, and we are the government that has been able to successfully unlock the investment that LNG Canada had for this province and for this country. And we have successfully done that, Honourable Speaker. But to honestly think, as the opposite members do, that a jobs plan is the only way that you would address poverty, to honestly think that, Honourable Speaker, is to bury your head in the sand. It is to clearly be working for the top 2%, because poverty is so much more complex than just go get a job. It is more complex than that, Honourable Speaker. It is mental health and addiction services. It is better care. It is better care in the Ministry of Children and Families, Honourable Speaker. It is better care in the Ministry of Social Development, Honourable Speaker. It is better health care. It is K-12. It is post-secondary education. It is opportunities for training and apprenticeships. Apprenticeships that they have been criticizing this week, Honourable Speaker, in question period. It is about minimum wage, a minimum wage that they refuse to lift, Honourable Speaker. For over a decade, they refused to lift minimum wage, Honourable Speaker. A poverty reduction plan is also about housing, Honourable Speaker. And what have we done on that front? Well, $6.6 billion investment over the next 10 years into affordable housing in this province, something that they ignored for years. It's also about childcare and investing in childcare so people can get back into the workforce. And we're investing $1 billion into a childcare program, one of the most significant new social programs that British Columbia is going to see. Poverty isn't just a simplistic jobs plan that the BC Liberals introduced, Honourable Speaker, or they still talk about today from the opposition benches. It is more complex, and it requires a complex solution. And it requires a coordinated effort. It requires a plan. And it requires a plan that holds government accountable. And that's what we're introducing. That's what we're bringing to the floor of this legislature and joining with every single other province and territory in the country with a plan. Finally, BC is among its Canadian partners in having a poverty reduction plan. No longer is this province ignoring the issue. No longer is this province burying its head in the sand. No longer is this province simply working for the top 2%, Honourable Speaker. This province's government is working for every British Columbian. And the fact that we're introducing this legislation today shows that, Honourable Speaker. And I'm very proud to be with a government who recognizes that addressing poverty is a priority and that we have the courage to take it on. And I want to congratulate the minister responsible because he's the member who first introduced the concept of a poverty reduction plan to this House back in 2011, and that he is now the minister in introducing legislation, not as a private member from opposition, but as the minister responsible, I think is very, very exciting. It is wonderful, and I'm so glad that he's had the opportunity to do that. And I'm so glad that British Columbia has had the opportunity to finally join with the rest of Canada to take this issue seriously and develop a plan so that we can tackle poverty in this province and see it reduced and see prosperity go to everybody, Honourable Speaker, because that's what British Columbia deserves.